Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of PhotoBiz Live. This is Danny from the PhotoBiz team, and today we're going to be joined by Andy from our Passionate Support team for a webinar about HTML tables. So if you're joining us today, you're probably wanting to learn a little bit more about HTML tables and code, so Andy's going to be able to guide you to those answers, and he's got a great presentation planned for you today. So in addition to getting the opportunity to learn from Andy in today's webinar, we're also going to have a question and answer session at the end of the webinar. So you can submit your questions using the chat tool, and they're going to be answered at the end of the presentation. You can also join the discussion on Twitter by using the hashtag #PhotoBizLive. And if at any point during today's webinar you have any difficulty at all hearing Andy or myself or seeing the presentation slides, you can use the comment box that's part of the software that we're using today to let us know. We're also going to be recording this webinar, and we will be placing it on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/PhotoBiz. So be sure to subscribe there the next time you visit our channel so you can receive our latest updates. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Andy.
Hello everyone, this is Andy from the Passionate Support team. Alright, so today this is going to be a rather technical webinar, but I'm going to both present you with the information and then show you how you can use this in your PhotoBiz control panel. So, let's get right to it. Okay, what is a table? This is an example of a basic table. At its core, a table is an organization of content into rows and columns, called rows and cells in this case. This table is something that I've created with the PowerPoint software. It works basically the same as HTML tables. You have headers, you have rows, and then you have cells. And they're structured. And that is one of the biggest things with HTML tables, is that they provide structure for your website, as I just said. Now, the cells in a table can contain just about anything you can put online. We can type text directly in, we can copy text in and format it, we can include images, we can include hyperlinks, we can include HTML coding. So if you have say a email sign-up form that you'd like to put in a table, you can do that. Where can I use a table? This is going to be one of the biggest questions. And it's going to be anywhere in your account that will accept HTML code. If you have our BizSite store or blog, that's going to be all of your HTML content sections. The BizSite and the blog, the text content sections, also have an HTML option there. Product and service descriptions, again, this would be for the store. And for those using the portfolio sites, the splash intro page. Now, I want to point out that portfolio sites are not designed to handle this code. You may be able to make this code work in certain areas, but it's not designed that way, and we can't guarantee it's always going to work. So, if you have questions about that, please call our Passionate Support team and just check with them ahead of time. Okay, the anatomy of a table. 3 basic pieces of code create a table. And these are called tags. The first is the table tag. It's a very basic tag. You have a left caret, the word table, a right caret, and it declares to the browser that a table code is coming. All of these tags are symmetrical tags, so when you open one, you close it. So the start of the table has table. The end of the table has /table. The next bit is our rows, and these are done with the code TR. Each set of TR and close TR is one row in your table. Inside those rows, we use this TD. The TD there stands for table data. They're also called your cells, and they create the columns for your table. A little bit later, when we get into the actual practice, we'll see how we open these and close these. They're called symmetrical because you close them in the opposite order that you opened them. But as I say, we'll go over that with a demonstration. Okay, so speaking of, let's start. Now, what I'm going to be doing today, we're going to make a very, very basic table. We're just going to put some basic text in it, and then I'm going to show you what a more advanced table would look like. So, and we're also going to cover some basic coding ideas. Now, the very first thing we'll do is we'll put in our table tags to declare our table. So I'm going to go over to my control panel, and what you'll see here, you'll notice I'm working in a BizSite right now on a Marquee Plus page. Now you'll notice I've got some text content here. This is just some basic text that I've included. If you look into the HTML content, you're going to see a lot of code here. Now, this code has been commented out, and what that means is This code is there, but I've told the browser to not display this code until I tell it to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my code down a little bit, and we're going to start by adding a table tag. So we hit the left caret on our keyboard, we type out the word table, and then we put a right caret. Now, you can put the close table tag immediately after the table tag, but for organization, let's go 2 lines down and close our table. So we've told the browser that a table is coming. Now I'm going to save these changes and go to our view site. Okay, so you'll notice when this loads for you that there's a large blank space here at the bottom. We've told the browser that we're building a table, but we haven't given it anything to display yet, so it's not going to show anything. Okay, so we leave some space there, and that's for the content. That's so we're not having to, it's going to make our code easier to read, and that's going to be another big thing we're going to look at when we're coding these, is that we want to make sure that we can read our code, and that if someone has to come in and help us, they can understand our code as well. Okay, so now that we've told the browser that we're going to create a table, we need to make some framework for the table. Today, we're going to make a 2x2 table. So, as you can see in this demonstration, what I've done is I've created 2 sets of rows. Now, we'll go back over to the control panel, and we'll enter this in. Okay, so what I've done here is I've added some space. If you're coding inside your control panel, you won't be able to use the tab key. If you're using a product like Notepad, TextEdit, or Notepad++, then you can use the tab key. But what we do is we put a few spaces in, and that way we know that this is our table rows. It's just considered good coding to split your content like this. That way, again, it's very easy to read. So I've typed in my table rows, I've opened them and closed them, and I've given them each their own line. Now, whether they're one line or multiple lines, it's all going to display the same. This just makes it much easier for me to read my code. Okay, so like I say here, the tabs, the spaces, we're just looking for ease of use. Okay, so the very last thing is we're going to add some cells. Now, you'll notice that the code is there's a lot of T's, TR, TD, TD, and as we look at this code, this is why we call it symmetric. We open a table row, and then at the very end we close it, because everything between those two is our row. Now you'll notice that I open a table data and then I close a table data, because each column just has its one set of content. So again, back over to the control panel, and we will take a look. So this time, I'm going to use the Enter key and space out this TR again. So now my TRs are in a line. I'm going to make some more room, and I'm going to come out even further and put in my table cells. So since we're not putting in content yet, we're just going to type it like this. Now, if you want to put each cell on its own line, you can. I personally prefer to put all of my cells on the same line just so that I can see my rows very easily. That's a personal preference there. As I said before, no matter how you set this up, the browser is going to read it, spaces or not, and it will all work the same. So now we've got 2 rows. Those are our 2 TRs, and we're entering 2 columns, or 2 cells per row. Now we haven't put any kind of formatting in here yet, and we haven't put any content in. With these in here, we've built a framework for the table, but we have no content for the table yet, so we've still got a blank space. Now comes the interesting part. We're going to add some content. Now, when you're first starting your work with your tables, it may get a little bit confusing, but the way it works is top to bottom, left to right. So, you can see, again, I've named each cell with a number. And we're going to, the reason for that is so that when we look at it, we can tell where everything is. So here in our first one, we're going to call this cell 1. And you'll notice I'm simply typing in here. I haven't had to format. I don't have to tell it it's text. The browser recognizes that if it's in between it's in between a TD tag, that it should display it exactly as it's written. Now this means if you need to format it, you need to put the formatting in here. That's something we'll look at a little bit later. So now I'm going to save these changes because now we have some content. So we're going to go back over to our preview of the website and refresh it. So now we see our table. Like I say, very basic table. You don't actually see any framework here because we haven't told it to display a border. We haven't given it any color. We just have a little bit of basic text here. Now you'll see we name them cell 1, cell 2, cell 3, and cell 4, and they read left to right, top to bottom. And that can be important later when we're trying to find things and modify them. Okay, table options. This is where we're getting into modifying the tables we create. Now, some of these are important, others are less useful and more for organization and making your code concise and readable to someone else. Now, the very first one we look at is T-head, and this designates a header section of the table. Now, this in and of itself doesn't really do anything for us. This is something that, when we look at it, it's considered the header, but that doesn't modify anything. The difference when we're writing a header for our table, instead of using TD, which is table data, we use TH, which is table header. And the difference there is that any text you put inside of a TH cell will automatically be bold text because it's considered a header. Now, if you use T-head to create a header, it's generally good form to include T-body. Now, T-body doesn't do anything, but it distinguishes the rows and the cells of your head from the rows and the cells of your body. When we were looking at T-head, TH is the cell, but we still use the TR for the rows. Now, something that's very useful in a table is this phrase you see here, Colspan. And what that stands for is column span. And for this, it increases the width of a cell, but it doesn't base it on any numbers. It simply says this cell should take 2 columns worth of space. That's going to be really useful when we look at putting in headers or if we need to put a break in the table, because we can tell a cell that it needs to be longer. Okay, so since we've done that, let's go ahead. We're going to add in a header to the table we're writing. Now, this is some abridged code here. I've taken out the body, and this is just showing the table head. You'll notice we open with a table tag, just like before. Then we declare that we're writing a header. So we have our T-head tag. Then, just like we did with the basic table, we write out our rows and our cells. But again, instead of using TD, we use TH. So let's go back into the control panel, and we're going to take a look at adding this in. Now, the nice thing about this code is that we can simply add it in and build our table one step at a time. So what I'm going to do here is, since we've already have a table built, we're simply going to add on. So I'm going to give myself a new line. I'm going to come out a few spaces, and I'm going to declare that I'm writing a header, my T-head. Now that we have this, we're going to come out a bit further just to keep things the same, and we're going to declare that we have a row. Now, when you're practicing, write your opening and your closings at the same time. The more practice you get, you can hold off on writing your close until you're done, but this is the best way to make sure that your code stays symmetrical, because if you miss a closing tag, it throws things off. So now that we've written our row, let's add some actual content to it. So this time we use a TH tag, and we're going to close our TH tag. So this is our first table cell. So as you saw in the PowerPoint, we're going to call this column 1. Then we're going to create another cell because we have 2 columns, and we're going to call this one column 2. Now, again, when you're practicing, when you're starting, I always recommend saving your changes every time you make a change, because there is nothing more frustrating than spending 30 minutes writing code, forgetting to click Save Changes, and having to rewrite your code entirely. So let's go back to our view site and see the change. So we now see column 1 and column 2, And even though we haven't done any formatting to our text, our column headers are in bold, whereas our table cells are in normal font. And this is what declaring a header does to a browser. Now, of course, we can go back and we can always modify this later, but this is, like I say, this is the quick and easy way to make a table. Okay, as I said before, T-body is not required. It separates the header and the body, and it's considered good code to add this in. Now, as you saw in my demo account, I didn't include the table body tag, and it displayed my code just fine. This, again, if you know that you're going to be the only one writing your code and you don't want to use the T-body, you don't have to. It's just considered good form. Okay, so let's look at Colspan, because Colspan is incredibly useful. It's column span, and it's what we would call a relative width measure, because if I say it has a column span of 3, that cell will be 3 columns wide. If those columns are all 50 pixels, then the Colspan 3 makes it 150 pixels. If there's a wide variety of widths, it simply takes the overall width of 3 columns and spans them. Now, every time you write a TD or a TH tag, we have a base Colspan of 1. That is understood by your browser, so if you find yourself writing Colspan equals 1, you can eliminate that code. Now, the format for adding your Colspan, this modifies your TD or your TH tag. So down here you'll see it's TD space, the word Colspan, one word, the equal sign, quotation mark, and then a number. I've used X here. X is simply the number of columns you want to span. So if we want to make a cell that spans 2 columns, we do Colspan equals quote 2. If we want to span 30 columns, Colspan equals quote 30. So we're going to go back into our demo, and we're going to make a larger column header. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back down into my code, and we're going to increase the span of the header column 1. So I go into my TH tag, I add a space, I type the word Colspan, I hit the equal sign, I add a quote, the number 2, and I close my quote. Now, this modifies the TH tag. There's no close to it. We just simply say that everything within this TH tag should span 2 columns. So now we're going to save the changes. And what I'm actually going to do here is add an overall border to my table. And the only reason I'm doing this is so we can see our table span. Okay, so now when we look at this, we see that we still have 2 columns in our header. We have column 1 and column 2. In our body, we have 2 columns. But we've told column 1 that it should be the width of both of our body cells. And with our borders, you can now see this. The border around the outside is the table itself, and then each cell has a border. Now, adding a border like this is not always the best idea because it gives you very little control and it wraps every single element in this border. But it's really nice for demonstration purposes because, as you can see, column 1 is actually 2 columns worth of our body. Okay, table border. Now, this is what you just saw me do. In my case, I used a 1-pixel border. In this example here, we have a 3-pixel border. As I just said, this will apply this border to every item in your table. It will put an inner border and an outer border. Like I say, this is not really all that recommended, simply because it's a very overarching type of border, and it gives us very little control over the look and the feel of the border. So if you want to try it out, go ahead. The phrasing here is border equals quote a number px. Now, this is a place where we're not using relative measurement, we're using an established measurement. In this case, in this example, I'm telling the table that its border is 3 pixels wide. And there are a few things that are default. If we don't specify, a border will be a solid black border. We can change the color, we can change the style, but the defaults are solid and black. Okay, we've practiced putting some text into the cells, but we can add images. We can add just about anything here. Now, what I've written here is some basic image source code. What this code does is it tells a website, or rather a browser, to look at a URL for an image and display that image on the website. Okay, so if you need some help with your image tags, we do have a webinar on basic HTML coding that's included there. So what I'm going to do is I am going to change the content of my second table, or rather my second cell, first row in my table body. And just like any other HTML code, we type it directly in. We open with a left caret. We do img, which declares it to be an image. We do an src, which says our source is, and then we tell it where to find it. Now, generally, you'll copy this in. I did not have this copied to my clipboard, so I'm typing it in directly. As I say, it's always a better idea to copy because it prevents misspellings. Now, you'll notice that with this tag, I simply hit space and then put a /. And the image tag is what's called a self-closing tag. Since it just tells the browser to display this image, we don't have to tell it when it stops. The image stops where the image stops. So now I'm going to save the changes, and we'll go back over here to our preview. Oh, and I appear to not have closed a tag somewhere, if you will forgive me. Now you see, this is why I say it's very important to pay attention. If you'll notice what I just did there, I forgot to close my quotation marks around my image, and it brought up every bit of code that I had on the table, which is not what we were looking to do. So that's why we always want to be careful and we double check our code. So let's take a look at what that was supposed to look like. So what I've done is I've added in a small PhotoBiz logo. Now, if you've been watching, the second column has gotten wider because the column's width at this point is determined by the longest piece of information there. You'll notice this also made my header extend further because it's a relative measurement. Cell 1 and Cell 3, because they only have that text, are still the same size. Cell 2 and Cell 4 have increased in size in order to handle the image that we've added in there. So like I say, this is a wonderful demonstration of why it's always good to double check your code, and if you can't find something wrong, bring in a friend to take a look at the code. You'll even notice in my example here I forgot my quotation marks. Okay, basic tables work really well if all you need to do is organize. They're great for magazine-style layouts where you want to have 2 columns of text. You simply create a table with 2 columns, 1 row, drop your text in. When we look at making nicer tables, we add the style tag. Now, like Colspan, style is added to another tag. You can add it to rows, you can add it to cells, whether they're header or body cells. And it's written as style equals, quote, the style name, a colon, and the value, followed by a semicolon. Now, style names are determined by what you're working on and what you want to change, and we'll go over those in a bit. Below, I've got a very few basic codes, very basic style names. Now, you'll notice this, again, is the format. We go into a cell, we put a space, we type the word style, we add the equal sign, and then we open with a quotation mark. Now, I told you before that the basic border is a 1-pixel solid black border. What I've done here is I've written that code out. I've declared that the border will be 1 pixel, it will be solid, and it will be black. Now, those 3 bits of information apply to the border, so I followed them with a semicolon. and this tells the system that there is more to follow. The next bit of code is background-color. That, as the name implies, sets the background for that table cell. Now, you can use either hex codes or HTML names. Now, your basic colors are going to have HTML names, whereas if you want to get more creative and you have specific colors, your hex code is going to be a better choice there. So we're going to come back to our table and we're going to add in some style. Now, we've done the second cell of the first row with the image, so let's work in the first cell so we can actually see what the background will look like. Okay, so we add a space, we add the word style, equal sign, quote. Now, because we know that the basic border is a 1 pixel solid black border, that's not really going to do much. In fact, I'm going to delete my border declaration from my table. So we don't want to use a basic border, so let's try something else. We're going to do a 2 pixel border. We are going to tell it that it is a dashed border, and we're going to make it blue. Okay, and then we want to continue on, and we're going to add background hyphen color. That's our style name. We're going to add a semicolon, or rather a colon, and we're going to just type in the word red. Actually, because we've already seen this, let's use the hex code for red. Now, when we use hex codes, we have to open with the hash symbol, and then we type out our hex code. Now, red just so happens to be FF0000. So typing the word red or using this hex code still produces a solid red background. Now, we end with the semicolon, and this time I remember to close my quote. So again, we'll save the changes, come back over to our preview, and take a look at what we've done here. Okay, so not the prettiest thing ever, but it's a fine example. We've removed the border from the overall table, so our cells are now floating in space, and we've declared a 2 pixel blue dashed border around cell 1, and we've told cell 1 to have a background of red. Now you'll notice this does not carry over to our other cells. Copying and pasting is wonderful if we want to have multiple cells look the same way, or if you want to create a header with a specific border, you can do that. There are 2 kinds of styles when we look at tables. There are styles that apply to the table itself. There are styles that apply to the cells only. And then there are style declarations that can apply to either one. Now, you'll notice earlier when I did my border, I simply did border colon. If you want to specify a single portion, then you use border dash. In this case, it's border dash width. It's a value in pixels, and it determines how thick the border is. Border dash style. These are written values, and there are specific ones. For example, solid, dashed, and dotted. You'll also find ones like inset and outset, double. There's a decent list of those, but generally solid, dashed, and dotted are the most common and popular. Border color. Now this is what we saw. It works exactly the same as the background color, where we either do a hex color or we do the HTML color name. And again, these can all be found online with a quick search of HTML color names. Most often they'll also provide you with the hex color. As we saw, background dash color. Now again, these apply to either the table or the cell itself, depending on how much we want to do. Table specific. Now these apply to the overall table only. These are done in that opening table tag. Border spacing, border dash spacing. Again, this is a value in pixels, and it adds space between the table and the cell borders. When we did the border equals 1 to show our cells, you saw how there were 2 lines very close together, creating that double border. That's because the table had a border and the cell had a border. If we want that look, but we want to put some space, we do border spacing. The next table specific is called border collapse. Now, it only has two values, separate or collapse. The default is separate, but you can declare it to be collapse. The purpose of declaring a collapse is that it will combine these borders into one where they meet. So your inner borders and your outer borders will combine themselves so that you don't have that double. Okay, cell specific. These only apply to your TD or your TH tags. Padding. This can be done as padding. If you declare padding, it will apply it to the top, the bottom, the left, and the right. And this creates space between the outside of the cell and whatever is in the cell. So if you have a picture that you want to put on a background, you can pad the picture and display some background behind it. If you just want a bit of separation off the table edge, you can declare padding. Now, because the basic padding applies to all four sides, we can specify. We can even specify all four at the same time to different values, and they're done as padding dash name. So padding dash top adds 5 pixels of border to the top of the cell. When you're doing this, think of it as moving your text that direction. If you pad it on the right, it slides to the right. If you pad it on the left, it slides to the left. Okay, if you want to find out more, these are 2 websites I really strongly recommend. You can search for them either way. There is W3 Schools and Code Academy. Now, W3 Schools is, you can learn code there, but it's much better as almost a glossary or an index for coding. Code Academy, on the other hand, has an area where it will go through and teach you how to write HTML from top to bottom. And one of the things you can learn from Code Academy is taking your table from this very basic unformatted table to what I wrote a bit ahead of time. So I'm going to remove my old table, and what I've done to this table is comment it out. And all I did was I told the browser not to display it. So what I've done is I've removed my comment code. So now we come back over and we see a very large table. Now I've gone ahead and at the very top we have the welcome webinar. That's a table header. It's got a column span of 2. Then I have an image with a column span of 2. You'll notice down here that I've put a bit of information in here. In the top left, I've got some text that I've actually formatted. The second paragraph there I've set to a monospace font type. Every browser supports monospace. If you want to get to some of the more intricate fonts, they may not be supported. The browser will grab whatever it has that's close to it, but monospace works for everybody. You'll notice I've put my picture in here to the right, and there's a lot of space around this. That's because the tables are set by the width of the largest area, which you'll notice the text below me expands to the edge of the site, creating a large blank space. Now the 2 columns on the left, I've actually declared their width to be 300 pixels. That way, no matter how much text I put in there, it will only go to a certain size. If you want to put a menu on the right, if you just want to have some text on the right, but you don't want it to spread out, you can do that. Now you'll notice the box below it also has text, but we've got this padding around it. That's because I added in some padding, and this creates the space between the border and the text. One of the most popular reasons to use these tables is to get a magazine type display. Below you'll see I've added in some lorem ipsum, some basic text, and all that is, it's a table with 1 row and 2 columns. The text aligns itself to the left and gives us this magazine display. So that is what I have for you today. Do we have any questions? Okay, well, it doesn't seem like we have any questions today. Please remember, if you do have any questions later, or if you're trying to do any of this and you get stuck, you can always call our passionate support team. This is one of the many things they can assist you with. You can even ask for me specifically if you'd like.
All right, well, I just wanted to thank everybody for attending and thank Andy for taking the time to put together a great presentation and let you guys know that we are going to have this again on our YouTube channel. So you can go and head over to youtube.com/PhotoBiz and we'll have that webinar online. Be sure to check out our blog so you can see the upcoming webinars that are available for free to register for. Thank you, everybody, so much for attending, and I hope everyone has a great day.